verses 10 through 13. He says, I rejoice greatly in the Lord that at last you renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. I'm not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need. I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. Now in these last, let's see, 10 through 20. In these last 10 verses, 9 verses of Philippians chapter 4, there are 3 very well-known memory verses. Okay? And we have to know these verses and understand these verses in their context. So, Paul is in prison when he says this. Maybe under house arrest, which means that Paul had to pay for his own necessities. In our prison system, the government provides prisoners food, toiletries, bedding, clothing, everything that they need. Back then, the prisoner had to provide all those things, or family of the prisoner, or friends of the prisoner. That's why churches sent reps to minister to Paul. Well, the Philippians had supported Paul, and now apparently after a break or a delay in either not being able to or for some reason not supporting him, they had provided for him again. And then Paul says here that he has learned to be content whether in need or in plenty. How would you describe or define contentment? I love that Paul says here that he learned to be content. That means that there was a time when Paul wasn't content, or that in his situation he would not have been content. But he came to understand that in all circumstances, and he talks in these verses about need and plenty, well-fed and hungry, plenty or want. Contentment doesn't fill your stomach when you're hungry, does it? No. But Paul's contentment was learning, as he says it, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. And again, as I said, got to understand the context of where this verse is. Don't take that verse out of its context. Paul is saying here that he is not going to complain or gripe or whine, but he trusts that God has his best interests at heart. So he will continue with an attitude of joy and gratitude for God's goodness, and he will trust that wherever God is leading, even if that is hunger, even if that is prison, even if that is need, even if that is death, he will trust that God is leading him there out of love. Now, how could hunger, need, prison, or death be an expression of God's love? It always comes back to, I think, God's priorities for me are often different from what I think priorities for me should be. Okay, and that's part of growing spiritually, is that you agree with and are content with God's priorities for you. God's priorities for you are not that you have, that you have a black balance in your checkbook. God's priority for you is not that your pantry is full. God's priority for you is not that you have 2 new cars in the driveway. God's priority is for your character development, that you are becoming more and more in character like Christ. And his priority for you is that he takes you home to be with him. And so Paul says, whether I've got a lot, whether I got nothing, whether I'm hungry, whether I'm well-fed, what does it matter? I got Jesus. And God's working in my life, and God's going to take care of me. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but God's going to take care of me. Ultimately, God's going to take care of me.